Hello, I'm Tracy Nicholas, and welcome to Folkloring. I am a passionate folklore practitioner, and to me, folkloring is more than just a podcast. It's my commitment to help you connect with your roots and awaken the wisdom within you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Folkloring, which is going to be the second in a series that I'm doing about dark goddesses. The last time I went over some more well-known goddesses. Hopefully this time I'll get some that you haven't heard of, and even if you have, maybe I'll give you a little more detail that you didn't know about. But before I get into all of that, I wanted to tell you how I've been folkloring lately. And it was just Lunasa, as I'm recording this. And so I went to a lovely ritual with my friends, and we celebrated the first harvest. And of course, there is much harvesting to be done. All of my herbs are going crazy. My basil is out of control. My cucumbers have been doing great. And I've even got a couple of little baby eggplants that I cannot wait to see them grow to maturity. So that's what I've been doing lately. Okay, so getting into it. Now, if you listened to the last episode about dark goddesses, I am going to go over some of the same stuff just very briefly for those who haven't listened. So if you did listen previously and this sounds repetitive, just feel free to fast forward through this portion. But if you're anything like me, that was a couple of months ago that I released that, and you probably won't remember it, unless you're binge listening. And if you are, thank you. Okay, so definition of a dark goddess. A dark goddess is a goddess who has challenging aspects to her. Now, a lot of times it has to do with death or punishment or the underworld. Dark goddesses are very powerful, but they can be destructive. And so they use primordial energy, either emotional or environmental, in their work. They can bring chaos, and they often have sort of light and dark dual aspects to them. So that's what a dark goddess is. Now, why would you want to work with a dark goddess or use the symbolism of a dark goddess? And dark goddesses can bring pain, and they bring transformation. And as human beings, we don't always love pain, and we try and avoid it. So it makes sense that the dark goddesses are not ones that people work with as much. But the dark goddess can help you transform, can help you uncover what you're hiding even from yourself, right? And they will help you to tear down behaviors, habits, beliefs, relationships that no longer serve you. Now, this can be very painful, but it's ultimately to your benefit. Now, when we talk about death and transformation, like real change, it really is a death of part of your life, part of who you used to be. So when you're transforming, it can be very painful to let go of some of those aspects, but that's the way that we move forward, right? Now, when you work with a dark goddess and you are looking at transformational work that you're doing with yourself, there's no guarantee who you're going to be at the end of it. You're changing. You don't know. You're leaving the familiar behind for something that you don't know where you're going to end up. And that can be really frightening. It's, the unknown. And the unknown, you find it in the dark, the void, in the woods, the ocean deep. It's scary places to be for human beings. Now, the dark goddesses rule over things that we fear. So she offers us wisdom in that transformational way, but it's in exchange for our pain, right? It's hard to change it. It's painful. Now, gods and goddesses are not parents to us. They're not going to be raising us. They care about us and aspects of our life, but they also have their own agendas, and they have a larger picture in mind than our life. And so when you work with a dark goddess, this becomes much more obvious that they have other things that have nothing to do with you. They're not there to serve you necessarily, although if you develop a proper relationship with them, they're happy to help in many cases. I talked about this last time. When you're working with gods and goddesses, you don't just walk up to a stranger on the street and say, hey, I need this favor, or hey, I need your energy to apply to this. You build a relationship with someone before you start asking. And the same is true when you choose to work with gods and goddesses. And I think that this is even more obvious when you're working with a dark goddess, because you want to be sure that you're not pissing her off, because you want things to go well, and it's already a dangerous venture, a dangerous path that you're heading down. So just a note of caution. Okay, so on to some of these goddesses, and I am going to start with a Mesopotamian goddess, Tiamat. She was a primordial goddess, and she is the personification of salt seas, right? She's also a mother of gods, right? She's primordial. She's associated with chaos, but the chaos of creation. Now, Tiamat and another god, Apsu, who is the personification of the fresh water beneath the earth, they are the source of a family of gods, with whom, get this, they eventually went to war. Now, Tiamat was slain by Marduk, who is the chief god of the city of Babylon. And from her body, he created the universe. Now, in some later myths, Tiamat was sometimes portrayed as a serpent or a dragon. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. And the name stems from a word that means the sea. Tiamat is known primarily from the Babylonian creation story, Enuma Elish. So in the beginning, there was only Tiamat and Apsu, until the mingling of their two waters started producing deities. Now, the first were the twins, Lamu and Lahamu. But after that, more gods followed pretty quickly, and conflicts started to arise. Now, Tiamat and Apsu, they were old school gods. They preferred rest. They preferred to, just sort of chill out. But the new, younger gods were very active and energetic, and they started creating a lot of noise and other disturbances. Notably, the dancing of these gods upset Tiamat because it was churning her waters, and she wanted to be chill, she wanted to be mellow. Apsu eventually decided to destroy them. Now, Tiamat opposed this. She didn't really want this to happen, but he decided enough's enough, I'm going to destroy them. But before he could attack them, another god, Ea, killed Apsu and then built a temple over him, which seems rude. But that temple eventually became the birthplace of Marduk, who, the eventual chief of gods, right? Now, Marduk's grandfather was named Anu, who is the god of heaven. And Marduk, it's most likely that he began as a god of thunderstorms. It's a little unclear. Now, Anu created the four winds and gave them to Marduk to play with them, right? So he's playing with the wind, it's blowing around, and of course this churns up Tiamat's water, and she is getting more and more annoyed. Now there's another group of more elder gods who also were upset about the disturbances, and they thought that all of this was disrespectful to them. So they started to pressure Tiamat to kill these disruptive gods, and she finally relented, and she formed an army of monsters to go attack and kill them. It's like the, original, you kids get off my lawn. And so this army was opposed by the forces of a couple of gods, Anshar and Kishar, who represented the twin horizons of sky and earth. Now, there was a mighty battle, but it failed to turn Tiamat aside. So eventually Anshar asked Marduk to fight the goddess personally. Now Marduk agreed to this, but demanded absolute authority. And so ultimately Anshar agreed to this condition. Okay, so Marduk was made king, and he set out to fight Tiamat. At this point, the army fled, but Tiamat stood her ground and had a mighty battle with Marduk. Now he sent the winds that he had been given to incapacitate her, basically. And so as she was stuck there, he killed her by shooting an arrow through her heart. Now, at this point, he divided her body in two and used one half to form the heavens and arranged the sun and the moon and the constellation. And then from the other half, he formed the earth, creating mountains and continents, and Marduk ruled everything. Now, Tiamat's physical appearance, I talked about this earlier, is really not described. There are some vague descriptions of her in this creation story, but she's depicted as both, a woman, a body of water. At one point, she's said to have a tail. So because of this, she's sort of associated with dragons and other kinds of sea creatures. So that's Tiamat. The next goddess that I want to talk about is Itzpapalotl. And she was also called the obsidian butterfly. And this was in Aztec mythology. Her dominion extends over the realms of death and rebirth. She possesses a remarkable regenerative ability, representing the cycle of life and death that she embodies. Now, she leads a group of powerful star demons that in part pose a threat of devouring the sun during eclipses. Now, they collectively act as guardians for midwives and for women during labor. Now, she is the matron of witches, and she sort of works between the realms of creation and destruction, motherhood and bloodshed. And as I was talking about earlier, she has sort of a dual role. She's a benevolent queen over paradise, really, and she's also a very powerful female warrior. Now, as I said before, she's called the obsidian butterfly, and she has butterfly wings that resemble black stone blades. She's often depicted with a skeletal head and sharp claws, and her wings are knife-like, and they can be used as knives. Now, alternatively, sometimes she's shown with bat wings, but mostly it's butterfly. And in her skeletal form, her bones are polished and gleam black like obsidian. And as I said, she's got these claws. Both her hands and feet have these razor-sharp talons. Now, in addition to protecting midwives and mothers giving birth, she also specifically tends to the souls of infants that died before reaching, childhood. And she nurtures these souls by providing a substance from what is called the suckling tree. And it sounds very, it's life-affirming, but it's also really weird and bizarre. But anyway, that is the myth, that there is a suckling tree, and that's how those infants are taken care of and nurtured. Now, she's part of a group of goddesses. In addition to being in charge of the star demons, she also belongs to a group of goddesses called the Divine Women, and they're associated with women who passed away during childbirth. And they collectively wield power that kind of extends to the heavens, and they can influence natural phenomenon like storms and even earthquakes. They are intricately tied to the cycles of life and death and the delicate balance between those. And I find it interesting because this sort of maternal connection really illustrates the Aztec belief system that sacrifice, which is symbolized by the shedding of blood, contributes to the cycle of life and death. So you can sort of see how these stories grow out of what the belief systems are. Now, she does have the ability to shapeshift. And so in addition to the description I gave you earlier, she can also become a very beautiful woman with long black hair. And in certain myths, she even adopts the entire appearance of a black butterfly during solar eclipses, and in that form, she consumes souls. So, yeah, good and bad with that one. Okay, now I'm turning to Greek mythology. And I am going to look at a goddess named Nyx. And Nyx is the personification of night, basically. And so she's the goddess of the night, and she too was a primordial god, and she emerged at the dawn of creation. She is the one creature that Zeus feared. And there's a story about this in Homer's Iliad, if you want to look that up, book 14. But yeah, like even Zeus was afraid of her. She's that formidable. She was the daughter of Chaos and the mother to a bunch of primordial gods, including, or I guess forces would be more accurate, including sleep, death, the fates, old age, and in some cases they say it was pain. So a lot of negative stuff. The ancient art that depicted Nyx showed her as either a goddess with wings or a charioteer. And sometimes she would be portrayed as sort of like have a crown of dark mist around her head. And her main role was to bring night over the world and allow rest to those who have toiled all day. She presided over dreams, so that's very interesting. I wonder if she was linked toward more nightmares or just dreams. Powerful dualism, right? And in addition to sort of these darker nemesis, pain, old age, she also was, linked toward sleep and the fates. And this dualism, I think, really shows that night isn't really good, it's not really evil, it's a combination of both. Again, back to that duality of the dark goddesses, when I suppose it's true of any of the gods. There are good aspects and darker, more challenging aspects. We just keep seeing that over and over. Okay, now I'm going back to Mesopotamia, and I'm going to talk about a goddess called Ereshkigal. And Ereshkigal was called the Lady of the Great Place, which refers to the abode of death, right? So she rules over the dead. In the 3rd millennium BC, in those texts, she was the wife of the god Ninazu, but in later texts, Ninazu was accounted as her son, so a little bit of confusion there. And in those later texts, she was the wife of a god named Nergal. She also had a sister named Inanna, and there was a lot of bad blood there. But I'm not going to talk about those stories right now, because those are really stories about Inanna, and I'm going to circle back to her in another episode in this series. So I want to talk about those a little bit later. But she was, of course, overseeing the realm of the dead, and that's where she reigned, and she was on guard over the fountain of life in case any of her subjects in the realm of the dead tried to take of it and so escape the realm of the dead. Now, she had a servant who was her offspring named Namtar, and he was an evil demon of death, so very powerful. And her power actually extended to the earth, where she could go and in a magical ceremony, she liberated the sick that were possessed by evil spirits. So she's always represented in rituals and prayers as a very powerful goddess. But in stories, she's also depicted as one who can forgive an injustice or a wrong if it's in the interest of the greater good. So again, the duality. Interestingly, a cult of the dead formed around Ereshkigal, and they would honor those who had passed into her realm and continue to remember and care for them. And one of the ways they did that, they thought that the dead had nothing but muddy water to drink and dust to eat. So they offered food and fresh water at the tombs. They pour water over the tombs, and that was thought to trickle down into the mouth of the departed. And it was pretty far-reaching. In ancient times, this cult worship extended to Asia Minor, Egypt, southern Arabia, so she really had a far-reaching impact. The final goddess that I want to talk about is Irzuli Dantor. And I'm going to tread carefully here because this is a goddess that is in the voodoo tradition. And I don't want to misrepresent anyone's beliefs, so I'm going to try to be careful here. Now, in voodoo, a key facet of this belief system are the Loa, and these are spirits that basically act as conduits between mortals and the creator, Bondi, sort of like the saints in Catholicism. Now, the Loa are divided into several families, and the Irzuli family is one of them. And sometimes the lines are blurred a little bit. Sometimes they say that there are various members of this family. Sometimes they can be interpreted as being different versions of the same Loa, and there's one version in each of the families. Other beliefs place the different Loa with the Irzuli name into two families, the Irzuli family and then sort of a wider Loa family. Now, around 17 of these Loa families exist, although there are two main families, the Rada and the Petwo. The Rada are seen as being from Africa, being cool-tempered. They're associated with water, and their arrival in the Caribbean over the water that's how they're linked to the water. Now, the Petwo are seen as coming from the Caribbean itself. They're loosely associated with the Haitian Revolution, and they're seen as hot-tempered. And the Irzuli family belongs within the Petwo family, this larger family, right? Now, in general, the Irzuli family is associated with love, art, and sex. Doesn't sound very dark yet. And the three members are La Siren, who is a personification of the sea and a goddess of childbirth. There's Frida, which is a virgin goddess, and then there's Dantor. And Dantor is the goddess of lust and jealousy, which is where the dark part comes in. She is also the protector of women's wealth and will watch over women-owned businesses. She is the patron Loa of Haiti and New Orleans. So Haitian people in both of those places often worship her. If a partner of a woman acts violently, and it doesn't matter if it's a male partner or female partner, women can call upon Irzuli Dantor for vengeance. So it does get pretty dark. Now, she also represents the love of spouses, parental love, and queer love. And so it's an interesting kind of balance. And I know I said that she's a spirit and not technically a goddess, but I really wanted to include her because I think that this belief is so interesting, and again showing that dual aspect of protecting the women, but then there's that vengeance aspect of it and the destructive aspect of it. And I think that it's interesting that it's a goddess that is associated with lust and jealousy, but then is also a protector of women. What it brings up for me is it the jealousy of the men? Is it the lust of the men who might attack the women that creates this association? Because, of course, Dantor is going to then protect them if there is violence that is perpetrated onto them. In depictions of her, she's shown as a dark-skinned woman, and oftentimes in art and on shrines, she's pictured with her infant son, sort of highlighting that maternal aspect. And again, back to the duality. I know I keep saying it. Okay, on to the folkloring part of the episode. If any of these goddesses do appeal to you and you think you want to work with them, I'm going to reiterate what I said at the very beginning of the episode, which is build a relationship with them. This is an ongoing effort when you want to work with gods and goddesses that, again, you don't just go up to people and ask them for stuff without having a little bit of a relationship, friendship, and it's the same with the gods and goddesses. But if you do decide to go ahead and, offer that respect, build a relationship, and you want to appeal to them, these goddesses, they have their preferences, just like anybody, right? And so I'm going to go through, if you want to do offerings or build, small shrine, whatever it is that you decide to do to approach the symbolism of these goddesses, I'm going to give you some ideas of what they like. So for Tiamat, again, back to the ocean connection. Ocean water is good. Sea salt can be used. Maybe a little bit of sand. And remember, Tiamat was associated with sort of serpent, dragon, sea creature. And so dragon's blood incense would be good. If you choose to do so, you can use blood. If you don't want to do that, which I personally wouldn't, you can also use red wine. And those are all appropriate for Tiamat. If you decide that you would rather work with Itzpapalotl, remember that was obsidian butterfly, right? But also connected with rebirth, life, protected mothers and midwives, and protected the infants who died before growing up. So perhaps you would want to think about using milk, tying back to that suckling tree, right? Maybe flowers for the butterfly aspect, so the pollen that the butterflies would go to the flowers for. And obviously obsidian. If you are wanting to create an altar or just do a ritual, obsidian is always going to be one of the things that you want to use for that. Okay, for Nyx, offering ideas. And again, Nyx was associated with the night. So darker things, maybe a dark molasses, dark chocolate, maybe black tea, black coffee, red wine, dark berries. So a lot of those things that are associated with anything dark. And maybe you balance them with the light, because again, all of these goddesses have lighter aspects to them. Now, Ereshkigal, again, associated with the underworld. So maybe you want to light some dark colored candles. And honestly, for any of these goddesses, you might want to light dark colored candles. A red wine. Also appropriate here is bread and beer, dates, water, and again, potentially blood. That's not my deal, but if that's what you want to do, that's great too. Now, Erzuli Danter, a lot of altars are still being constructed for her, and so things that are used a lot, silver chains and necklaces, other jewelry, perfumes, red wine, this is a fun one, strong cigarettes, and also dolls and daggers. Now, if you're going to do food offering, besides like the red wine, you can use rice and peas, you can use yams or sweet potatoes, because apparently all of those appeal. And of course, working with any gods, goddesses, spirits, ancestors, whatever it is that you choose to do, remember, one of the important things is your personal connection. How did you come to that god? Do you have a specific thing that you associate with that god or goddess or ancestor? Whatever it is, because those are the things that really help you identify with it. If your belief is that you're connecting on a real level, those things connect you more strongly. If your belief is about the symbolism of working with the gods and goddesses, again, having those physical representations of your personal connection is always going to be the most useful. And it's about how you think about that god or goddess and how you want to incorporate it into your life. So those are suggestions. Those are things that people have come before and said, here's what these goddesses like. But it's you trying to figure out what your connection is. So don't ever forget that. Okay, that is everything I have on dark goddesses. There are more of these to come. I'd love to hear what you think about this series, if you're enjoying it, and if you want to have me look at some other goddess that I'm not thinking about that has sort of those darker aspects, I would love to hear from you. You can find me on Blue Sky. You can message me. You can find my website at folkloringlife.com, and you'll see all of the different things I'm working on there. So thank you very much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear from you. You can also find me on Facebook, and just message me if you go to the website or the Folkloring Podcast site. You can find all my contact information there. So thanks again, and I hope to hear from you soon. As always, thank you for listening to Folkloring. If you have any questions or comments or would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, please email us at folkloringpod@gmail.com or message us on Blue Sky, Facebook, or Instagram. Other places you can find me are at the Folklore Podcast as the theater, film, and storytellers correspondent, or creating folklore-inspired games at madmenandheroes.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and keep the traditions alive. And I hope that wherever you are, folklore is making your life more magical.